Today we're going to talk about receiving and storage. By the end of this video, we hope you have a better understanding of the receiving process as a whole, go over proper storage of items and dating them as we receive them. We'll talk about what FIFO is, as well as the return process. Let's get started by talking about the receiving process. Here in the picture, we're showing a Shamrock invoice just because they're our main vendor, but the same process would apply to any of the vendors like Aikens for dairy or whatnot. But as soon as the driver shows up, they're going to give you a copy of the invoice. What you're going to do is you're going to check in items as they're brought in by the driver, going up against the invoice, making sure that all the items are there and also in the correct quantities. Some of the things that you want to keep an eye out for are expiration dates. Here we use milk as an example because that's something that you should probably pay really close attention to. Not only are we looking for anything that's actually already past the expiration date, but we also want to make sure that we're looking to make sure that they don't have expiration dates that happen before our next delivery or before we could even happen to use it all. We're also going to be checking for quality. So here we got some mangy looking lettuce that we don't want. Also keep an eye out for damage and also signs of time temperature abuse. Some examples of that are, say, for frozen items, anything that might be frozen into a solid block that should be loose in IQF, that's a sign of time temperature abuse, or something that has excessive ice crystals, or even watermarks on the boxes. Those are just a few examples. If anything happened to be missing or damaged, it's the driver's responsibility to make adjustments on the invoice. So in this example, this is a real life picture of one that we got back. It seems that they're missing something that costs $73.96. So the driver has adjusted it over here with the amount. And then at the bottom of the invoice that has that total, he is subtracting it out and giving us the new total. We need to make sure that they do this so that we have record of it, and then when Missy is going to pay the bills later on, she can double check to make sure that they have adjusted the invoice on their end. All right, so you're checking in your order. You're going to keep this box because everything looks okay with it. Next thing you're going to do is take a marker and really big, very visible on some place where people can see it, you're going to put the date that you received it. You can see this right here. Now, the vendor sticker does have the date of that we receive it on it, but it's very, very small right here. So the purpose of writing it is so that it's big, visible, much easier to see, and it helps with proper rotation of stock. Now that we've received our food, let's talk about putting it away in the proper food storage hierarchy. So first thing I just wanted to cover is, yes, some of these things don't really apply to us here in our kitchens because we don't cook some of these foods, but this is still information you need to know for basic food safety, passing your food handler's test, and even for use at home. So starting at the very top is ready to eat foods. So here I've got some bread, I've got some salad dressing, and I have this whole tomato. Ready to eat foods means that it's anything that's not going to be cooked any further before being consumed. So even though you might not necessarily bite into this tomato whole and you're going to slice it, it's still ready to eat. You're processing it by slicing it, but you're not cooking it. All of this right here is considered that ready to eat category. Next up is raw seafood, and then it would be raw whole meats. Not really something we have to deal with because we're not exactly having prime rib carving stations and shrimp scampi or anything like that. So not something we deal with much, or at all, actually. Not at all. Next would be raw ground meats. Now that is something that our central kitchens do deal with. That's all 7 of our high schools plus 3 of our larger elementaries. They do cook raw ground meats that they send out to the receiving kitchens as well as for themselves. So that's one of the only things we deal with that's raw. Down at the very bottom is raw poultry. Again, not something we really handle. So the reason for this hierarchy is because we're putting the thing that would cause the most hazard down at the bottom and the thing that causes the least hazard at the top. Because while it's not really a big deal if our salad dressing dripped onto our raw chicken, it would definitely be a big deal if our chicken dripped onto our bread. So we're putting that most hazardous thing at the bottom, mitigating the problems it could cause, and that least hazardous thing up at the top. One thing I just want to note real quick is that food must be stored at least 6 inches off the ground. We will talk about more of that a little bit later too. Like I said in the previous slide, we don't deal with a whole lot of raw product. So this one is a little bit more typical of what you might see in our kitchens. Really, that only thing that's raw is potentially ground beef, but the rest of our foods are all basically ready to eat, which is actually a major bonus for us for when the health inspector shows up. It makes our jobs a whole lot easier. In a normal, and when I say normal, just I'm using finger quotes, air quotes right now. In a normal kitchen, the health inspector shows up and everybody's doing a mad dash to make sure that everything's in the proper hierarchy and checking everything. Well, for us here, it's pretty simple. Just make sure those raw things, that one raw thing is at the bottom, and then everything else is pretty much ready to eat. As promised, we're going to talk a little bit more about keeping food 6 inches off the ground. So our shelves are all made to keep, to be at least 6 inches off the ground. It's pretty standard, as you can see right here. But I just wanted to talk about 2 other ways that you might see us do that. So we have these things that are called dunnage racks. Here on the left with the water, that's an example of it being used in the dry storage room. And then over here on the right with pizzas on it, here that's an example of it being used in the freezer. Dunnage racks are mostly used for big bulky items that are heavy, so big cases of water. You might also use it for like cases of canned products in your storage room, in the freezer, the pizzas and the french fries, anything that's heavy, big, and bulky, and it just doesn't make sense or would actually waste space to put it on a shelf. So that's just another way that you can keep food off the ground, and a little makeshift way for when you just need a little extra space and you don't have space for another shelf, but you need to make another stack. You can also flip over a milk crate like they have here, and they just stacked up a few cases right on top. It's keeping it 6 inches off the ground, and it's just a nice little thing that you can do when you're in a pinch and you need a little extra space. Now let's talk about FIFO. FIFO stands for first in, first out. It's a rotation method that ensures that older product gets used first. So in this particular case, we were receiving cherry tomatoes from the vendor, but we still had some cherry tomatoes left from the delivery before. So this is exactly why we mark it with the date received with the marker, so it's nice and visible. We took those newer cherry tomatoes and we put them on the bottom, and we took those older ones and we put them on top. So then we're working our way, put the older ones first, and then eventually we'll get to the newer ones. We don't want to just put those new ones right on top of the old ones, because then those would get used first and the ones that we should be using would just be sitting there going rotten. One thing I just wanted to note quickly is that keeping things neat and organized really helps with keeping things properly rotated. So here's a picture in a storeroom. It's hard to see right here, but they labeled part areas of their storeroom. Like this says canned fruit. Very helpful. Keeps things really uniform. Another thing you could do is to label boxes so that they're easier to identify. So you, I can't even see what it says right now, but they labeled some of the boxes so you know exactly what it was. In another case, like our bean filling as well as our bean burritos, the boxes look exactly the same. So marking what they are might just be that additional step that keeps people from having to dig, and it keeps things together and more organized. And again, on that same note, make sure you're keeping like items together. So even though these berries have been taken out of their box, they put them on top of that other box right there, so they're still all kept together. This keeps it from, if things aren't kept together, you can't see what you have, so you don't order properly, you don't rotate properly, and things are being used when something else should be used. Another thing that I found in some kitchens that I really like is that they keep all the breakfast things in one area and like all the chicken things in another area, all the grill items in another area. It can just be really helpful to keep that proper rotation. FIFO is really beneficial to us because it ensures we're serving the highest quality products that we can, and it also reduces waste. Both of these things help our department financially. So let's just use romaine lettuce as an example. Serving high quality foods leads to customer satisfaction, which can lead to an increase in our sales or prevent sales loss. So using that romaine lettuce right here as an example. So let's say you're not rotating properly and then you end up making salads with some lettuce that's a little past its prime. Not fully bad, but the quality could be better. A kid opens that box of salad and they're like, ugh, this lettuce isn't that good, and then they stop coming in for lunch. That could be a way that proper rotation could have just saved us by giving them a higher quality salad. Look at how pumped she is about her fresh salad, and then she's gonna keep coming back for salads every single day now. Another thing that it does is that reducing waste saves us money. So again, with the romaine lettuce, what if we had just kept putting those new cases in the front and using all of those, and that old one just kept sitting there on the shelf? Then we finally have to break into it because we're going through a lot of product. We open it up and it's completely bad and we cannot use it. So we throw it away. Throwing away that case of lettuce is literally the same as just throwing our money directly into the garbage. Now let's move into talking about product returns. I wanted to start off by talking about how in an ideal world, we're going to be checking everything as we're receiving it. And if the quality is not up to par, we would return it right then and there while the driver is still there. But I also live in the land of reality where I understand that's not always going to happen. Things get missed. Maybe they're delivering on a day where you're super short staffed and it's right in the middle of your biggest lunch rush. Things might get missed. So I want to start off by just emphasizing that these items here on this slide are things that the vendor themselves have deemed return upon delivery only. So pay special attention to them whenever possible. Again, ideally we're looking at everything, but I understand some things happen. So this includes highly perishable and special order items. Highly perishable such as milk, produce, and ice cream items, and then special orders. How do you know if an item is special order? You may not, but generally speaking, it's something that Callie has asked you for usage on. Special order items are things that the vendor is bringing in for us specifically, so that's why they want usage. When you're returning things upon delivery, best practice is to still shoot Callie an email just letting her know what happened, just to give her heads up in case any questions come her way from the vendor. But let's say you missed it and now the driver's already gone. Now what? Well, the vendor needs proof in order to be able to issue us credit. They don't just take our word for it. When you return upon delivery, the driver is that proof. They're there to see it. So now that they're gone, we need to be able to provide them with that proof. So what that means is that you're going to email our buyer explaining what the issue is along with pictures. Lots and lots of pictures. You're going to take a picture of the product in the original box. Then you're going to take a picture of the Shamrock label on the box, and then just a picture of any other of the product information on the box that might be describing what it is. She will then forward this information to the vendor to get the credit and/or pickup processed. This process will apply to all of the returns in the upcoming slides. Again, just reiterating what I said earlier, perfect world, we return everything upon delivery, but if you happen to miss some stuff, we do actually have a 7-day window for refrigerated and frozen items, just in case it were to be missed. We're just trying to avoid the vendor giving us any kind of opportunity to not give us credit, so that's why it's best to return upon delivery, but we do have a bit of a longer window for some of these other items. Dry storage items have up to 14 days. That would include dry foods such as pasta, canned goods, anything like that, supplies and equipment, as well as chemicals. Canned goods are kind of their own beast, so let's get into that a little bit. Any cans that have leaks, bulging, or holes, you want to discard immediately and send pictures to Callie. If the seams are damaged, discard and send pictures as well. I just kind of wanted to show you the seams here. This is the side seam right here, this line up and down, and then at the top, that's considered the top seam. This would not be a usable can because the dent is on the seam, so this is one that you would discard. If the can is not bulging, leaking, or has holes, but it's dented but not on the seam, you can just use it immediately. If you're unsure of whether or not a can is usable or not, send pictures to Sandra or Callie and they can clarify for you. In the meantime, while you're kind of waiting for clarification, it's best practice to have a specific dented can area in your storeroom that you can put those in the meantime while you're awaiting clarification. So what the heck is a mispick? Have you ever heard that term before? A mispick is when the sticker label from the vendor doesn't match the actual item that you received. So in this case, one of our kitchens should have received cereal, if you can see that. That's what they ordered. But what they actually received was stuffing mix. Now, personally, I would much rather have stuffing for breakfast than cereal. I wouldn't mind one bit, but that's not what we were looking for. It just means that they got mixed up in the warehouse and they probably have the stuffing sitting in the area where the cereal's supposed to be. Shamrock thinks they sent us the cereal, so we need to send them pictures, just like we talked about in those previous slides, proving to them that, hey, your sticker says this, but you actually sent me this. Again, send all this information to Callie and she'll get it processed. When are some times that you can't actually send something back? Well, first is when you make the mistake. We're going to make mistakes. It's going to happen. We're all human. It's understandable. But just because we made a mistake doesn't mean that we can expect the vendor to just take it back. So for example, let's just talk romaine lettuce again. You meant to order 6 cases, but you were 10 keying it in really, really fast, and you accidentally hit 9 instead of 6 because it's right below the 6. Shamrock shows up with the 9 cases, and you're like, no, I only need 6, and you're trying to return the 3. Well, it's not their fault that the 9 showed up. It's ours. So in that case, you're going to try to keep it. You're going to see if another school might use it. If there's a way that you can add something to your menu to use it up, those are just some options that you might have. Another example of when you can't is when it's a substitution. So an example from this school year was, I think twice, 2 different rotations, we were supposed to have fried raviolis and they were out. So they substituted us with mini tacos. So let's say that Shamrock shows up at your school and you're like, no, I don't want these mini tacos because they don't go with the menu that day. I don't want them. And you try to send them back. Well, the reason we can't do that is because we cleared for that to be substituted. Callie was in communication with them and she says, yes, go ahead, bring the mini tacos. So now it's not up to you to just decide that now we're not going to take them. The good thing about substitutions, though, is that Callie keeps you up to date and lets you know usually the day before, anything that's going to be substituted. So the day before and the morning of that we're receiving deliveries, keep a close eye on your email so you'll be able to know when something is a substitution that you can be expecting so you know to keep it. If there really is something that you truly feel you can't use, always just give the buyer a call and she can let you know for sure. Today's video can be recorded for PD under Operations, codes 2520. Thanks for watching.